give us a photo tour and comparison of several turtle robots, which are contemporary with the Apple II. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I've been interested in robots for about as long as I can remember. In fact, I can't remember a time I haven't been interested in robots. And I'm not alone with being interested in robots. There are a lot of companies, kits, books, magazines, you name it, about robotics that are accessible to the amateur, to the hobbyist today. You can buy a working robot kit, have it delivered, and within 24 hours of him riding around the floor with very little technical knowledge. But there's also a lot of information on their websites printed about those robots. I have a magazine that just came out last week. Some of you may recognize it, Make Magazine. The whole issue is dedicated to robots. I would have opened the shrink wrap, but I've been busy with this thing called KansasFest this week. Welcome to come by and take a look at it afterwards. People have been interested in robots for a very long time. I'm not sure why. I think the idea of a cybernetic organism making your own life form, or maybe just having someone else do your laundry is very valid. And the advent of the personal computer in the late 70s really opened up robots, make them much more accessible to the home user. Previously, computers were too large, too expensive, too slow to be very useful in robots. After the personal computer, robots were much less expensive, much smaller, and there were a number of books starting in the 1970s, late 1970s, as well as magazine articles about how to build your very own robot at home. All this ties into logo. Most versions of logo for the Apple II had one or more small robots that were attached to the Apple II. I mentioned floor turtles the other day. With one of these floor turtle robots attached to your computer, you can use the logo graphics command, forward, back, left, right, to control your robot, draw a pattern on paper, and as I mentioned earlier, the screen graphics actually came after the robots in the history of logo. That is effectively a simulation of the floor turtles. The floor turtles, the robots, were first added to the logo around 1970, and the graphics came a few years later. So I'd like to start off talking about where the term turtle comes from, the origin of that term, and then I'd like to give a photo tour of some of the robots, some of the turtle robots that were contemporary with the Apple II. I'll talk about some of the features, some of the things they had, and then lastly I'll finish up with a little bit of reflection, ideas on how we might use robots with the Apple II today, the direction we go. This is a robot from the late 1940s. Actually, this particular one was built in the early 50s by a fellow named William Gray Walter. William Gray Walter was born right here in Kansas City, Missouri. He moved to England at age 5, and he studied to become a neurophysiologist. His interest was in what makes something alive, what makes intelligence. He was trying to understand that mystery. He had a theory that a complex set of interconnections, a root set of interconnections between a small number of simple elements, neurons, would give rise to complicated behavior. He built a series of robots starting in the 1940s to explore that theory. This particular robot is presently on display in the Smithsonian Museum of American History. Go in the front door, down the stairs, turn left, go all the way to the end, look for the giant DARPA Grand Challenge display, and all the way tucked in the corner behind a pillar where nobody looks, you'll find this robot. Here's a picture of a slightly earlier model of his robot, but the interesting thing here is it highlights the various parts. He had a photo cell up front. He had a small headlight. The robots could interact with each other, with the photo cell on one versus the light on another. The control circuitry consists of 2 vacuum tubes. His ideas about how to control a robot, this simple analog circuitry lives on today, and was called beam robotics. But William Gray Walter called his robots tortoises. That's where the term turtle comes from. Go back to the previous picture. You can see how it resembles a tortoise. It's small, it's close to the ground, it has a shell, it also moves very slowly. Many years later, folks working on a logo, particularly Bert on a visit to Europe, saw some of these robots, got the idea of a turtle from those tortoises that were built in England. I don't know why he changed the name from tortoise to turtle. It might be a UK versus US English thing. I'm not certain. All these pictures come from various websites. I have links at the bottom, and the notes that will show up in the PDF that's on the website has some more details, some more links if you learn more. Let's move forward to the Apple II. I'll talk about the robots that were contemporary with the Apple II. This first robot is the Terrapin Turtle robot. It came out around 1979. They don't have an exact date. It required a wired tether to an Apple II computer. It was a parallel interface. Initially, you would just use any parallel card in your regular personal computer. I believe later, the Terrapin sold interface cards specific to the Terrapin Turtle robot, and it was something more than a parallel card. It would take commands and do something with them. I don't know if that's because there's a processor on the card or if there is firmware on the card, but the Apple II interface cards are a bit more sophisticated. Let's take a look at this robot. The plastic shell is touch sensitive. It's connected to a pole in the middle that you can see somewhat blurry there, and it's on a gimbal such that if the robot runs into something, the whole shell shifts, and then these black blobs are actually switches. There's 4 of them, and the switch will close and send a signal back to the Apple. There are 2 DC motors on here. The motors are open loop. There is no way for the computer to know precisely how fast the motor is turning or how far it has turned. It would make this robot very difficult to draw precisely. Many of the robots have preceded it, and some of the other robots we'll see here use a stepper motor, which allows them to precisely control the position. The robot also seems to have a reputation for being fragile. And I'm not sure if that's referring to the mechanical construction or if that's referring to what I just mentioned, the fact that it would be difficult to precisely draw lines. Behind here we can see some of its drawings. In the middle of the robot, it has a pen connected to a solenoid. It can raise or lower the pen under computer control. One thing I do notice is that some of the lines look a little sloppy, not quite straight over on the left side there. It's a little bit crooked. I'm not sure if they intended it that way, but this comes from a larger picture showing a computer screen, and it looks a little more precise on the computer screen, so I suspect that's showing some of the limitations of the robot. There's also a speaker on the robot up front. It's a black disc right here. There's an article in the 1979 issue of Byte that gives more details about the robot. It has schematics of the robot, and at least at that time, the robot was being sold as a kit. Later, it was sold fully assembled. This robot obviously works with the Terrapin logo, and there is an add-on from the LCSI that would also work with the LCSI logo products, including Apple logo. Questions, comments before we move on to the other robot?
Where's the tether on that? I don't see any.
It's not shown in this picture. I don't know why. It's not shown in that picture.
Well, why not look at it?
Yeah, the bottom left.
Right down there. Halfway between the bottom of the wheel and the edge of the bell. Yeah.
That's probably it back here. I have a copy of the Byte article. I think they had better pictures of the tether, but overall, by the time I pulled it off microfiche and scanned it, the picture was almost illegible.
Are there any of these still around? Any hobbyist folks out on the web who still keep these going?
I haven't found anything like that. They show up occasionally in eBay. There's an occasional website along the lines that I found this cool robot, look at my small pictures, but I haven't found anything about people restoring and using the robots today. I see no reason they could. I don't see any reason they couldn't be used. I think there's a combination of being relatively rare, especially after you bought your Apple II, you bought your copy of Logo, you bought your robot, bought the interface card, the power supply. You start to get pretty pricey, and they sold. Yeah, and also these do not have an onboard power supply. They take 12 volts across the tether. This is another robot that was developed in Tasmania. Remember, I talked about Logo. I mentioned that Tasmania was one of the research areas that was popular for Logo, and there are several publications out there from the era, from the university in Tasmania, and also reference to various schools and computer centers where I think quite a bit of research on it. This robot is the Tasman Turtle robot. It's been released in various forms and various kits. So it was also available complete assembled, and the complete assembled ones you could buy had additional features. I think they grew the robot over time, started with the basic kit, and then later they added speech synthesis, they added compass. I don't know if there were any other features. They had a handheld remote control for it. Anyways, let's compare this robot to the Terrapin Turtle robot. It's very similar shape, similar plastic dome. Here you can clearly see the parallel connection on the back. This robot has two glowing eyes. These knobs right here. Let's see if I can use a cursor. Oh, I can't use the cursor here. Anyways, what looks like a black knob is actually a pair of green lights that resemble eyes. Beneath that you see a cluster of 4 red LEDs, and those would light up depending on which side of the robot hit an object. And it also had a speaker that supposedly sounded like a beeping tone in a car when you forget to fasten your seatbelt. There's a contact bumper around the bottom of the robot. It's a little bit different than the Terrapin robot. There are, you can see, 3 of 4 plastic pieces around the perimeter of the robot, and there's small switches behind that. The motors are quite a bit different. They use stepper motors, which allows them to precisely control the speed and the direction of the robot. Overall, the press on the robot about the Tasman robot was much more favorable, partly because the movement was more precise, but also because there were expansion options. I mentioned speech synthesis, I mentioned compass, I didn't mention also speech recognition. I haven't found anything about those. This is part of a 3-part article about how to build the robot. I have that article if anyone's interested. But the article stops with the basic robot. And going back to what you were asking, Andy, this robot shows up on eBay every so often, but it's expensive and usually incomplete and untested. It would be very interesting to restore one of these robots. I originally had hopes of doing that, but given the cost, the relative scarcity of the robots, and as well as the supporting software, it didn't happen. Here's another view of the Tasman. It shows you the parts a little bit better. You can see the switches for the contact bumpers, and this one has some of the optional features. You can see the compass up top, the ring of lights, and I don't know what that stack of boards is, but it is probably a speech recognition or speech synthesis. Here's another view. Here you can clearly see the green light, the green eyes. You can also see the red contact sensors up front, and you can see the round speaker just beneath that. This was distributed also in the US and a number of other countries, but the majority of the literature I found about it comes from Tasmania. Another view showing it attached to Apple II running logo.
That thing is huge.
It is big, yes. And it's hard to get the scale of it from anything else.
Yeah, it looked like it was maybe 6 inches across. And now we see that it's about 18.
There's a drawing. The lines look fairly precise to me, especially for something that's being drawn so close to each other. And you can also see the power supply on top of the floppy drive. The big box is going to be a power supply for it. And again, it has to be tethered. This is a different robot. It's called the Turtle Tot, made by the same company that made the Tasman Turtle. I know nothing about it other than it was supposed to be a cost-reduced version of the Tasman robot. I believe, especially when you started adding all the options to the Tasman, it could run you several $1,000s.
It's an interesting drive system they got. Instead of directly driving the wheels, they're actually spinning a thing on top of the wheels.
Yeah, that is interesting.
That'd be you could get some slippage that way.
So it's still stepper motor, so.
It looks like stepper motors.
Yeah, I've seen drive systems like that when they want to gear it down without actually using gears, so it's cheaper.
Okay.
And for the size of the chips, I judge this is a little smaller than the other one.
That would be my guess as well. I haven't found any pictures in any other sort of context. You also see it's tethered. In the middle, you can see the mounting for the pen, the solenoid that raises and lowers the pen. This company, Flexible Systems, came up with some other turtle-like robots. I haven't been able to find pictures of them, but instead, I gather they released a whole series to hit different price points and improve it over time. This is the Valiant Turtle. It's the only one that I found that actually looks like a turtle.
Kind of an eagle turtle. It's obviously not.
Yeah, the glowing red eyes are a nice touch.
Yeah.
It's the turtlenator.
This one also has batteries built in. I believe it took 10 AA batteries, and they were rechargeable batteries. It's the only one that I found that comes out of the box wireless. It has an infrared base station. It communicates wirelessly over infrared to a computer of your choosing. I haven't found any Apple II software for it. I found some information suggesting there was Apple II software to support it, but I ended up, the only software I was able to find online was actually for the Commodore 64. And that software did not include logo. It included just the basic turtle graphics. Presumably, there are other products that interfaced it to more sophisticated software. This robot was available up until a couple of years ago. It's the Aoi Wow 2 robot. It's also available as a kit. This one is unique in that it has a built-in processor. All the previous robots had no built-in intelligence, no microprocessor. You had to tether them to a computer. Actually, I take that back. This one did have a built-in processor, but I believe it required tethering to a computer. I think the processor was only there for the wireless link. This one is potentially entirely self-contained. There's a keypad on the back. I believe it had 26 keys, and you could key in a program with a sequence of keys, and you can remember on the order of, I want to say, 24 different steps in the program. Probably fairly limiting. 24 steps in the program isn't going to get you very far, but it did also have an Apple II interface. I don't know if the Apple II interface was primarily for programming the robot or controlling it directly under something like Logo. This one, unlike the previous robots which had a ring around it to detect collisions on the east side, this one has a set of whiskers. If something hits the whisker, then it would send a signal, a collision signal back. Those are the turtle robots that I wanted to highlight, but I wanted to finish up with a couple of other robots that really don't fit the definition that I came up with earlier of a turtle robot, but we're still contemporary with the Apple II, and still, in my opinion, pretty interesting. This is the RB5X. I did not know about this one until last night when I was thumbing through one of Sean's Soft Talk magazines. And this one has a built-in processor. It's designed to be standalone. It supports programming in Forth and Logo. It does have an interface to the Apple II, but it had its own computer built into it. The company that built this is still in business, and their website claims that they're still selling it. Now, they don't actually have the price, but it would be interesting if you still can get it. It also has this one doesn't have Forth built in. This one has BASIC built in with optional Logo commands. Then you guys recognize the Hero robots. Again, they had their own built-in processors. They didn't need an Apple II, but there actually was an Apple II interface card for it. James has one. I'm sure he'd be happy to tell you all about it.
I just checked on the RB5X. It says the base without a dome is 400, but the whole robot is not available. The domes aren't available.
Okay.
So I think part of it's available, but not the whole thing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Use a column. That'd be cool.
I'm sure you could find something that's that shape, but
And the arm's also not available.
it also had a dock. I think those two yellowish dots.
The
in front of robot
charging
were a
station's
dock.
$100.
Oh, okay.
They have that. And they have expansion EPROMs for $20.
Excellent. It has a built-in 8-bit processor. It is not a 6502, unfortunately, but it was designed to be self-contained, and it appeared to be fairly sophisticated.
Oh, here's the actual price if you get the whole robot. $2,000 without the arm, and yeah, I found the price, and $3,300 with the arm.
Yeah, that's
So-
cheap.
Thank you.
It gets expensive as you actually get a complete robot.
Yes. Especially if you're trying to get something pre-built.
Yeah.
You save a lot of money if you build it on your own, but then you probably spend a lot of money if you just spread it out over time.
A lot of time.
A lot of time, yeah.
Yeah, your time's worth something. So.
Depends what your interest is.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
This was the Androbots Topo. They had several versions of it. The earliest versions were simply remote control. Later versions had built-in processor, and they had the ability. This was the one that has the ability to run Forth, and then later they also added Logo support. This is a picture from one of their ads. I don't know if it would actually run in sand, but it's a neat picture. Here's another picture I found. It shows the complete kit. I found it interesting how the wheels were set up at an angle like that. Supposedly it made the robot more stable. The robot would rock back and forth as it moved, but because of the arrangement of the wheels, it would always end up upright. Those are the robots that I wanted to show, but there are quite a few more robots that were contemporary with the Apple II. For a lot of them, it's difficult to find information. It's even more difficult to find software for them. It's interesting thumbing through some of the old magazines, early 80s, finding ads, articles for these, and trying to decipher what the robot was actually capable of, what its features were. Any questions about any of these robots? Any thoughts? Yeah.
Next year for your project, find one and bring it here and hook it up and show us.
I would very much like to. Yes, Jason.
I know someone who has one.
Which one? these?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. I saw it in the back of the house when I went to the interview, and I didn't recognize what it was, but I had this warm feeling looking at it. I was like, why am I emotionally attached to this robot? What's up with this? And it was because it had been in all those ads in the back.
Ah, yeah. This was a late addition to my presentation. I heard a lot of people talking about it when I mentioned I was doing a presentation about robots. So I had to add it. And as best as I can tell, it was very popular, and it maybe because it looks almost human-like.
Well, was that one that had the beer dispenser? Because I know there was one that had a beer dispenser on the side.
There is an ad with one of these robots serving a drink. I thought it was this robot. But
I know it wasn't that one.
Okay.
Because I know that one was more for education, and
Yeah.
that wouldn't be a feature you want in education. At least from what I was reading in marketing material, like in the past few years on that thing.
Okay. Yeah, interesting to see that.
But yeah, I recall when it could store like 3 or 4 cans and dispense them when you ask for it.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that then. I haven't seen any with built-in dispenser, just a picture of one carrying a beverage of some sort. Any other questions about these robots?
Just comments, make magazines, done a lot of stuff on robots. They've also got a podcast that they put out. And I think there's a once a week podcast that they post just on robots showing
I've seen some
current
cool stuff that people are
technology.
doing now at the
And it's
Maker Faire.
amazing. Yeah, Maker Faire sort of stuff.
And this is not the first issue that Make has done dedicated to robots. There's another one a couple of years back, and robots often show up in their issues that don't say robots on the front. There are hobbyist level magazines dedicated to robots. I'm aware of at least one servo. Actually, there's a second one. I forget the name, but there's 2 or 3 magazines dedicated to robots, plus a number of other hobbyist electronics magazines that frequently have articles about robots. There's a lot of books. So I guess that brings me to my last topic. Originally, I wanted to get one of these turtle robots. Particularly, I was most interested in either the Cassian robot and a little lesser extent the Terrapin robot, but I wasn't able to get one for the reasons I mentioned earlier. I then thought about trying to recreate one of these robots. I have schematics for this robot, and I have this magazine article that goes into pretty good detail about building the robot. When it comes down to it, I figured I'd spend a lot of time trying to recreate the robot, find the right parts, find the right materials, get a dome that's just the right shape, recreate the circuit boards, and so on. And I think the way forward for a robot with the Apple II would be to use modern technology. You could relatively easily build or buy a robot that's functionally equivalent to this robot or the Terrapin robot, and interface it with your Apple II. If you don't have your Apple II, the robot has a serial interface on it. You can use it with an emulator. If you order the Apple II, there's no way you do that. You could use it with your modern machine as well. So I think there's a lot of interest in seeing how they did the robots. There's a lot we can learn from that. I can see value in trying to recreate one of these robots, but at least for me, I'm more interested in the robot, playing with the robot, using the robot. So I think the direction for me would be to build a robot using modern components and then plug it into the Apple II.
I think that'd be awesome, just to recreate the interface. We got parallel ports, we could find the software, and then teach an Arduino to execute it as a turtle.
Yeah. Cassian, Terrapin logo and Apple logo have interfaces for several robots. And it's not a very difficult interface. It would be cut and paste those interfaces and then put in new characters to go out to serial ports and that. Because language already supports serial ports.
Building a robot's another thing on my to-do list.
Yes. I built a robot about 2 years ago. I think my next project will be interfaces in Apple II. It already has a serial port.
Perfect.
So looking at this for our robot.
This robot on the front cover is actually built on top of a Roomba. They took a Roomba and stuck a camera on it and a Wi-Fi router and some sort of netbook.
Literal.
Pardon?
It's a literal platform for building robots.
It is. Questions, comments, ideas about robots? How to build one?
There's something else contemporary that I remember. At the 1982 World Fair in Knoxville, Tennessee, the U.S. Pavilion only did this with a robot that rolled out on stage and come up and fly and watch the lights.
Okay, interesting.
It's on the middle lines here. I guess we were over at Apple. There was actually a robot race. A number of people built robots, and some robots were able to negotiate their way around obstacles, and others just bumped up against the competition.
Well, up in Canada, there's every year there's the first robotics championship competition, where it's all high schools that build their own robots and enter them into these competitions. Each year it's a different thing. It's like pick up a ball and get as many into your own net as you can. Nice thing.
First is also here in the U.S.
Yeah.
It's not just Canadian.
Oh yeah, I know. I knew it happened up there, and I haven't seen anything about them down here. It's just I hear about it up in my neck of the woods every year.
I know a few people who mentor for first, both in my area and up in Canada. So
I miss the television shows, like Robot Wars and things like that.
Yeah, I remember this too.
That's why you watch Running tomorrow on Mythbusters. Wait for him to pull it out.
Yeah.
His fighting robot, used to.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it was paired with a computer.
I can't remember what it was.
It was one of the big
One of the big
ones.
ones. It's scary.
If we were to build a robot today for the Apple II, what would you want it to do? Fix my Apple II for me. Fix my Apple II for me. That would be very nice.
Fold my laundry, slice my bread.
I could use that.
Couple of reasons I'd like to get into building a robot is one is puppetry. So computer controlled puppetry would be cool, and also to get into what do they call it, kinetic structure type things, right? Where you build, basically, I could build a large moving creature, right? Which would be a lot of fun.
I'd like to have a platform that you could use to solve a challenge, more than one challenge. Making a single function solution isn't all that fun, but a general purpose one that can do multiple things is interesting.
I agree with you. I could show you pictures of the robot that I built anywhere with you. Who wants to stop by my room later, I can show this to you. Also find you on my website at the beginning of the presentation.
Do you know when the robots will be taking over and will install?
I heard 18 months. You get one more campus.
Alright.
But I might be wrong. Yes.
Watching a presentation, I think I remember that I actually, about a year and a half ago, bought out a collection of computers and stuff from a retired high school physics teacher. As I was thinking about it, I remember one of the things he showed me was the joystick board on an Apple II, etc. He had built a bunch of science experiments that used the outputs and inputs on that. And I remember one of the things was a little remote control car that you could drive around. And I realized that okay, he put it as a car, but I suppose other than the precision, it's not any less a robot than that. It's just something that the computer drives around. And so he would have the students write an AppleSoft program that would drive the car. So I believe, I don't know how to live there, but I believe I've seen that. I'll have to try and check and see what I've got. If it looks like I have something interesting else coming up,
Here's your presentation for next year.
Okay. Thank you. I enjoyed talking to you, any of you, about robots later on.